Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Inna Segal. How are you today, Inna?
I'm very well, Desiree. Thank you for having me.
I am honored to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. I do want to share a little bit about you so the listeners have a fuller understanding of who you are and what you're doing. You are a pioneering intuitive healer. You are a best-selling author, and your book is The Secret Language of Your Body. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, but just to share a little bit more, you have dedicated over 2 decades to really helping individuals unlock the secrets of their body's wisdom. You help facilitate healing on an emotional, physical, and energetic levels. And again, we're going to get into all of this today. And would you tell us, Inna, how this journey happened for you? Like, what led you down this path to where you are today?
Beautiful. Thank you. I think for me, it's like for a lot of people, I actually grew up in a very kind of, in a home where people just took you to the doctor, basically. So there was nothing alternative about how I personally grew up. But I'm going to share my story from the perspective of when I was younger, I found myself in hospitals or in different scenarios where my digestive system just wasn't working and not really digesting food. I would get bloated. I would be in pain. I couldn't go to the toilet. And the doctors just didn't really know what to do with it. And I personally, and I'm going to connect all these pieces of how they kind of came together for me. I personally discovered later on that each part of the body has this wisdom and it's constantly communicating with you. And when you have issues that show up that early in life where I haven't lived, I haven't necessarily had my own traumas, usually it's connected to ancestry and just pulling stress from the family, but also pulling in what they haven't processed, what they haven't actually worked on. And I come from a family of people who have experienced major traumas. So my grandmother, her mother was actually clairvoyant, and her mother had 8 children, and my grandmother was the first who was born to her. And she said to her, when my grandmother maybe was 11 or 12, the war is coming. I can see it. And you and your father are the only ones who are going to survive out of the whole family, which is pretty intense to hear for a very young girl. And essentially, her mother gave her life to save my grandmother. I mean, she would have died anyway, but she protected my grandmother and let her run while kind of was standing there while she was being shot at. And my grandmother survived for 4 years in the forest in Belarus, and she did not process any of this. She kind of froze it. And then my grandfather ended up being in Siberia for 10 years, from 14 to 24, for something he didn't do in a camp. And again, did not really talk about it. And he used to say to me that it wasn't like you could go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You had to whisper, like you could end up in jail just for talking about it. So they suppressed and pushed it down and numbed themselves. And everybody in the family, I'm not the only one, ended up with digestive issues. And, essentially fears that they didn't know how to process. So I kind of was born into that experience. And I also lived with my grandparents for quite a while. And so that was my first kind of challenge in terms of my health. And then we ended up moving from Belarus to Italy, then to Australia. And I loved Italy. I absolutely adored it. But when I came to Australia, in my mind, I had this concept that Australia was going to be like Italy, but better. And it wasn't quite what I was looking for. So I had this sense of, oh, I'm a little disappointed, but I also don't really understand this culture and this country. And because I was so different and came from a totally opposite culture and country, in school I got bullied. I couldn't speak English. I was really struggling with understanding how people were brought up. And because I didn't feel comfortable in myself, I ended up always just, not speaking, trying to not breathe too much, trying to kind of be as small as I could. And that ended up creating another issue, which was psoriasis all over my skin. And this then led to, and I'm saying all this because people often think that there's one root cause of an issue, and it's actually not like that. There's foundational issues that are then layered from one experience, over another. And so when I ended up going to high school, my parents got an opportunity to put me into a private school. And this private school was very extreme in a sense that it had people who kind of came from Eastern European countries who struggled with paying an extra dollar for anything. Or there were people who came from like super rich households. And so putting those two together was very interesting because the people who were brought up as super rich looked down on people who had struggled and treated them in a sense like they're slaves. And whilst I had already been bullied, I had never been treated like a slave in my life in that way, and made to feel like I had to kind of constantly be walking around in that state of kind of stress and protection. And this started causing back issues. And what is really interesting in my own healing journey and discovery is that I can actually identify ages based on where in the body something shows up. So, for example, back pain, where I had pain in the lower back, is usually around the age of 7 to 14. So you always have these 7-year cycles. And so I discovered, through being bullied and through just not feeling like I could express myself and be safe, I ended up having these issues. But I also couldn't talk about it with my parents because they were going through their own challenges and conflicts of being in this new country. And all of these issues kept deteriorating and deteriorating. And then when I got to 18, I met my first husband, and he was very open to alternative medicine and started taking me to a lot of different people in alternative medicine, including chiropractors and kinesiologists and just healers and other people. But what I found was that I had been trained to show up to any appointments with the understanding and the idea that, hey, this is me and I'm going to pay you for this and you are the expert and you know what to do and I don't know anything. So do it for me. I also had another very big trauma that occurred when I was 19. I got pregnant. I went pretty much full term and then the baby died. So that was very, very traumatizing, but absolutely came into that experience of loss from my grandparents. And my back, my spine seized up even more. I just did not know how to move forward in my life. And so this brings me to the moment of transformation where I ended up seeing this chiropractor who I'd been seeing for a year. I was in agony. I was having difficulty walking. My whole back was twisted and inflamed. And I showed up in his office in this state. And he came out of his office and looked at me and said, "Hey, your body's stuck." And I said, "Yeah, I know this part. What are you going to do to help me?" And he realized that I was so stuck in a place of victimhood. I did not know how to move forward. And he also knew that I had to make that decision, that no matter how many adjustments he gave me, I would just go back to the same. And so he said to me, "I'm sorry, I can't help you, go home." And I was absolutely enraged by this. But on the way home, it really occurred to me that if my body was speaking and it was saying that I'm stuck, that I had something to do with it. And that there was this language that the body was speaking all the time. And I did not have any clue of how to listen. And so I went home and I thought to myself, I'm going to listen. I'm going to start by listening. And I started by placing my hands on my back because that was the biggest issue and breathing into that area. My mind was going crazy. So I was counting backwards from 30. And then in that space, it occurred to me to ask for higher help, which I did. And I felt this warm move through my body. And I have to say to people, I'm super skeptical. So it wasn't like I had great faith. The fact that it happened was amazing. And I just felt this golden light and warmth. And then for whatever reason, it occurred to me to ask, I wonder what it would look like if I could see my back. And again, at that point, I just literally felt like this. Somebody turned the switch on and I could see my back like I had this X-ray vision. And whilst I got scared at the beginning, not from the victim place, but from a place of really wanting to know, I asked, show me why I have this. And everything that I've just shared about my grandparents and my experiences at school and the loss, all of that started showing up as images. And as I would acknowledge and feel through something, the image would change. And I would feel like that tension that I had for so long start to release and let go. And then I fell asleep. And the next day when I woke up, 70% of the pain was gone. And my back wasn't twisted. And I thought to myself, okay, obviously there's a lot more to it than these glimpses that I saw, but I saw enough and acknowledged enough to have this experience. And so then I started, for the next few weeks, I was just kind of exploring my life story and changing my perspectives and feeling through the feelings that showed up. And by the end of those few weeks, my pain was gone completely, never came back. Psoriasis was gone. My anxiety went right down. My digestive system improved to where I could eat more food and not have these episodes where I felt so sick. But it took quite a while because it was very ancestrally based. And I also realized that I could tune in and see into other people's bodies at the same time. Not straight away, but within weeks of this. And I just felt like it was something that I wanted to share with people and understand, and really understand.
Oh my gosh. Inna, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It sounds like an overwhelming experience to go through so much of that. And as you shared, like that generational trauma. And I think that so often we don't consider that when we're looking at what's happening with us in our life. We're sort of ignoring what we came from and who we came from and what they experienced. And so thank you for sharing that, because it's something that we can all begin to consider in this process if we're looking at like what is happening in my life right now. What could have happened in the past or did happen in the past that's influencing that. So interesting. And then thank you for sharing what an insight that the doctor told you, I can't help you because you weren't ready to help you. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And so let's talk now about how the pain or the illnesses that we're experiencing are rarely starting from that point. And like you shared, your back was starting to hurt. These things were happening because of some other experience. And so can we talk a little bit more about that and how these other things cause pain in an area where it didn't start from?
Absolutely. So for me, for instance, it started from communication, just shutting down communication, not being able to speak the language, not being able to express myself. And this is what I say to people, that when we start tracing it back, and I often do these exercises with people where I'll get them to explore by placing their hands on the part of the body that hurts, and we'll breathe into that area and we'll ask questions. And then I'll say, okay, but where did it start? And we'll ask the body to show this through sensations. And then I'll say to the person or to the group of people, move your hands to that other part of the body. And it is almost never in the part where you're experiencing it, because we are, we are a being of communication, a being of connection. And so often the areas, so let me give you another example. So I had this lady that came to a workshop, and I didn't actually know that she had issues with her ankles and she was going to have surgery on her. I'm pretty sure it was the right ankle. And during the course, I was connecting to her and sensing that she had literally no self-confidence, and I was feeling that in her heart. I was connecting to that issue in her heart. And at one point I said, okay, we're going to work on the heart. And in particular, we're going to work on this confidence issue. And it was for her, it was for the group, but I was kind of guiding her through it so that they could see what was going on as well. And we did this incredible work where we identified that she hadn't spoken to her father for 20 years. And we did this energetic process of clearing cords. A lot of people do this cutting, which I don't agree with at all. Instead of clearing the energy, understanding what caused this, what causes breakdown in communication in her heart. And so we did that. And it's also very interesting because when we look at the ankle, especially the right ankle, it is so connected to moving forward in your life and to your father or to a male that maybe is holding you back or something that has not been processed. And within a week or so, her father called her after 20 years of not communicating. And she started recreating this beautiful healing relationship with him. And within weeks of that, her ankle spontaneously healed. But essentially, we never actually went and worked directly on the ankle. And so when I would see people and they would say to me, okay, I have this issue, I would go, okay, but let me see the body and let me work with it so that it shows me where exactly did it start. Sometimes people have depression and the issue started in their solar plexus. It started in their stomach. And I've learned all of this by understanding archetypes. So in the stomach area, you have the victim archetype. And the victim archetype, when we look at archetypes from Jung's perspective, he actually talks about them as being kind of parts of your psyche, but also parts that we can give to our children and grandchildren and so on. So it is also generational in that sense. If, for instance, you grew up in a family and let's say there were two parents and one of the parents, let's say it's a boy, and boys will always look up to their fathers. So let's say that your father had a really strong victim inside of them. And this usually occurs when they've had a difficult relationship with their own mother, right? So when a boy's had a difficult relationship with the mother, he will end up having often, if he doesn't look at this as he gets older, this victim quite a strong victim within, which then becomes, they become potentially very controlling and wanting things their own way, domineering at times, or just feeling like they're weak and they can't do the things that they want and they can't provide, and then all sorts of things like that. And so if the boy is watching this, internally he will start to go, oh, this is my example. And maybe they have other examples of men who have this victim going on in the family. And so they'll start shutting down their heart, which is where depression often comes from, even though this is coming through the digestive system and the victimhood, because they don't actually know how to become this strong masculine person that they want to be. And so they'll also potentially end up having digestive issues because often depression and digestive system are very, very connected in the intestines. But it's always interesting to me to look at things like the intestines look like cords. They look like something that connects, right? When we're in the womb, we're connected through a cord with our mother, through the umbilical cord. We connect to other people energetically through these energetic cords. That's why if somebody's been there in a relationship, for instance, for a very long time, then they'll start reacting off each other because there's so much stuff going on in these cords. When we learn about energetic clearings, we start to go, oh, I can truly understand other people by working with these cords and with recognizing what's going on from my side, what's going on from their side, literally kind of stepping into people's shoes and discovering things. So I feel like when we understand more, we start to go, it's very likely that where something started is not where it is now, because there are so many things that had to happen. So both parts of the body are actually giving you incredible information and insights. Where it is now is telling you this is where you got to. And where it began is the beginning of the journey. So you have to understand the beginning, the middle, and where it is to really transform.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing the detail that you just did in the example. That's so, so good, because I think we can really then begin to understand from the description that you just shared of how it can begin and where it can end. And so you can discover through a lot of reflection and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes to see how it like transformed and came to be. So I think that's amazing. And I think for me, listening to you describe that, I'm thinking of the pain that I've had in my back for probably 23 years. And why? Is a disc that popped out and is hitting the nerve. But why did that happen? You know? And so it's just like so interesting for me, looking at these examples or listening to these examples that you've just given, and try to understand maybe how it developed and it became what it is now. So good stuff. Thank you for that. And I want to touch on, you were describing for the gal who had the issue with her right ankle. And I think you share a lot about how you work with the left side and right side of the body, and it's sort of the feminine and masculine energies. And so what does that reveal to people in this healing process?
I feel like the more understanding we have of the body and ourselves, the more we can work with it, as opposed to work against it or get so frustrated with it. And so when we start to understand the different sides of the body, including the front and the back, we start to look at, well, the left side of the body, which has nothing to do with whether you write with your right hand or left hand. Yeah. That side of the body is essentially connected to your internal self. So we call it feminine because those are the characteristics of nurturing, slowing down, creativity, discovery, mothering, giving back to yourself, receiving is seen as the feminine side. Is, we see the yin yang symbology there as well. So our internal self, our heart, how we experience the world from within is connected to this left side. But it's also very intertwined with what did we see of the most important females in our lives when we were growing up. So whether, it was my mother and my mother figure, what did I see from her? And this is also how issues start, right? So for example, for women, reproductive issues occur potentially from the time you get your period or even later in life. Definitely as you get into perimenopause and menopausal timeline, from this early stage of what did you see? Did you see what you liked? Did you embrace it? Did you reject it? Did you say, I don't want to be like my mom or this important female or females in my life? What was there? Because the amount of reproductive issues women are having is insane. But also men. It's the same with men. what was going on, like prostate issues that show up later. I've been seeing this over and over and over again, that it is connected to earlier on in your life, not being loved by your mother, not feeling love. Maybe she did love you, not feeling the love, not connecting. And again, when I mention about time, so each part of the body, the way that I've spent many, many years tracing it and understanding it, has kind of a 7-year period of development that is also connected to the chakra system, the energy system that we have. And so when we're looking at reproductive organs, we are looking at, depends where it is and if there's a tumor or what's going on, where it is in the body. And it could be maybe, again, from that age of 7 to 14, potentially slightly younger, depends on where it actually is in the body. And so later, as we age and the body weakens physically, and we have something called the etheric body, which is this body of aliveness, as we don't have as much life force, these issues show up in a big way. And so we have these archetypes. We have the feminine archetype and the masculine archetype within us. The more we can embrace and work through any issues around lack of boundary, trauma. So it could be as simple, and I'll use my own example. When I was 15, I'm not going to say that it was completely conscious, but I've come back to this timeline several times to be aware of, what occurred. So at 15, my friends and I looked at our parents and went, and I feel like my generation was the earliest one to do that, because each generation also has their own thing that they're looking at. And so I wasn't looking at, women can't work or women can't vote. That was with my mom's generation. But with my generation, it was like, do I want to be like my mother? What am I seeing? Or do I want to be more like my father? And what am I seeing? It was at the time of Madonna coming out and being this strong, powerful woman. And I think us, growing up and watching and going, oh, we don't have to be, I'm going to say, we don't have to be housewives in that way. And housebound, maybe, for me at the time. So I was watching my mother and my grandmother and my aunt, and nothing of what they were doing at that time was appealing. In fact, I saw them as victims, and I was like, I do not want to be like that. So to me, feminine looked ugly in a way, looked like a slavery instead of the beauty of it, the beauty of potentially being creative and giving. And it's so interesting because my own daughter, we had this conversation not that long ago, and she was saying to me, Mum, you can see being in the kitchen as something, that is beautiful and giving and loving, and you can change your perspective, in that way, because we were working on the feminine and exploring it, which is beautiful because she's very balanced with her understandings of things. And so if you've taken on these kind of aspects, let me say, where you're going, no, I'm going to push away the femininity because I haven't defined it. So for me, I've had to really redefine it. Redefine, what does feminine mean? What does it mean to have gracefulness? What does it mean to have lovingness? What does it mean to have warmth? What does it mean to have patience? What does it mean to slow down? And kind of embrace that to create wellness in the left side of my body. And again, I've worked with so many women on reproductive issues, so many men on reproductive issues, and we always have to go back to the childhood and these relationships. But there's so many parts, because if you want to be more creative, colorful, alive in yourself, you do have to reclaim these feminine qualities. If you want to see life as an opportunity instead of this is painful and difficult. And then when we look at the masculine side, this is more of you. How do you show up in the outside world? What do you give? What do you create? How do you look after your family? What are your relationships with the masculine in you? Meaning do you think logically when it comes to certain areas in your life, maybe finances, maybe business, maybe how to raise your children in a certain way. What is the development of your masculine? It's kind of like your sense of your spine almost. It's kind of like, how do you take criticism? How do you recover from things that come from the outside that make you feel weakened or affected? What is your relationship with your father, with the masculine men in your life, or masculine people? How did they affect you? When you were growing up, were you encouraged to do what you really want to do, to discover what you wanted to do for a profession, or were you pushed into a profession? So all of this shows up hugely. And then this, and I relate to this because I've done it many times in my life, being a workaholic. And just, not giving the feminine the time to soften and just doing. And I cannot tell you, Desiree, how many women, again, in particular, I've met with breast cancer and breast tumors where we can, especially on the right side, and it's like, well, you never give yourself a moment of rest. So the more I saw this really taught me, the more I was like, hey, better change my, the way I'm doing this, the way I'm living, because the body is your map. And I keep saying this, the body is your map, and it's essentially constantly giving you feedback.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Oh my gosh, so much great information in there. And it's just so, so fascinating to me. I love that you just described the body as a map, because I think if we begin to look at it that way, we can, I don't know if it's dissect is the right word, but we can really begin to pull out or pin different things that are happening based on the areas. And so I think that's something to think about. But thank you so much for the detail on the feminine and masculine sides of the body, and understanding, like, how are you living your life, and how is that affecting what is happening throughout your body? Are you working to be whole and embrace both sides by sort of fulfilling these different aspects of those types? And so I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I love how your daughter shared with you about that reframing, how you can think about that feminine side. And instead of taking it like, well, most women have, in a way been taken advantage of and have done a lot of the work emotionally, physically, for the home and for the family. And so it could seem a bit like a slavery sort of position, but you can also take it and reframe it in the caring and the giving and the creating and the sharing. And so I love that idea. And not to say that we're just, wiping something out and coming over and bringing this thing in and that's all better and it's just beautiful. There's experiences that can be very negative. I'm not saying that there aren't, but it's such an interesting idea of how we can accept these parts and look at it in a beautiful, positive way. So I think that's brilliant. Love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so can we talk about your book? Because I think the secret language of your body, and your body is always talking to you, right? So let's dive into that and talk about what the listeners could find if they were to pick it up. What is it that you're really sharing in here? So those who are viewing it on YouTube, you'll see that Inna is holding the book out. But share with us what we can discover in it.
So when I originally wrote the book, I broke it up into different sections because I really wanted people to explore and kind of connect the different sections together. And so the first part is actually is the introduction, but it's vital that you read it. Because I see what people do is they skip the first part of introduction and then they go kind of right to the symptoms. And if you skip that part, you won't know how to connect to your body. You won't know how to discern which symptom relates to you and which doesn't, because I describe how to discern, because obviously I wrote it for a lot of people and it's sold over 1 million copies already. So you have to identify. And that first section gives you a lot of ideas also of what's really, really important to bring into your life so that your life works better and your health works better, right? So there's different pointers to it. And also how to use the processes. is vital to have success with the processes. And I also always find that those people who read the first section message me and say, oh my God, I've healed, my back, my headaches, my arthritis, my this. I can't tell you how many people I've met where they at book signings or events and they're in tears and they just say to me, oh my God, this book saved my life. I had it, next to me in the hospital when I was so unwell, which was so touching and beautiful for me. But then, I have this big section in the book after I talk about the principles of healing, of essentially all the parts of the body. So I recognize that it doesn't matter where the disease or the illness or the pain shows up, it's going to be in some part of the body. And so I figured if I talk about all the parts of the body, we can start to go to that section and we can discover, right? We can really discover and identify, oh, okay, this is connected to this part of my body. People often say to me, well, you talk about emotions, and it's not actually true. I talk about perspectives, emotions, ways of living, what you actually did. So I look at it from the thinking perspective of what did you think and what is your perspective? What did you feel? And then what did you do? All of us. So my will, my feeling, my thinking. Because to really transform, we often have to change the thinking, change how we experience that feeling, and then action. What's not working for you in how you're living your life? So we then move from that section to the elements. That's right. Maybe we move to the elements, and this is where I took some of the most common elements and broke them down into, again, the thinking, feeling, will, with the intention of having people start to go within and understand and do deeper work, and look at the parts of the body, look at the emotions, which is the next section, look at even the systems of the body, because the systems of the body give you another perspective of what it is that you are struggling with. And I also put in color, because color is energetic. So when people say, well, what does it mean? How do we work with energy? I get people to rub their hands together for about 30 seconds and then visualize a color. And so if you visualize red or feel it, I'm more into feeling the color than actually visualizing it. If you feel red, it's heavy, it's warm, it's kind of, as you pull it, it's not as easy to expand as blue. Blue is a cooling color. It's very expansive, and so when we start to, I guess, understand our bodies, we can work with all the parts. And that was my intention in some of the exercises. And I give a lot of exercises, especially in the body parts. I will use pressure points in breathing and movement, and other exercises, it will be, posture and opening your mouth in a particular way to get the breath into your chest, for example. So when we're working with chest infections, so, I encourage people to do yoga kind of lion pose in conjunction with color, in conjunction with changing your perspective, in conjunction with moving and shaking your body or something else, right? So it's like a journey of what is really going on here. But I do encourage people, if you get my book, please go to my website, which is innasegal.com, and please watch the masterclass related to the secret language of your body, which will be innasegal.com/secret. So it's very easy. And in the masterclass, I explain so many things. I actually guide you through the exercise of connecting to your body so that you can have that guidance immediately. And then the book will make so much more sense. But if you then want to go deeper, obviously you can purchase my course on the secret language of your body, where I guide you through so many processes and details of connecting to your own body and understanding how to befriend it, how to work with it.
Mm. Oh, that sounds amazing. And thank you for sharing your book with us. And I will absolutely detail the website so that the listeners can get to that masterclass you just described, because it sounds tremendous and like a really amazing resource to help you continue like developing the skill to help you help yourself, right? But let's talk about how you share that healing happens in stages and what happens when people try. And I think, you described a little bit about in your book, like, don't skip the intro. It's super important. So how is it detrimental, I guess, if you're trying to skip stages in the healing process?
Well, it is quite detrimental because you can have emotional breakdowns or physical breakdowns. And I'm actually finishing a book on this at the moment, on the different stages of healing. And I really feel like there's 8 very pronounced stages. And it kind of starts with pain and suffering, where we, like me, we get stuck in this pain and we just do not see a way out, a way forward. And we need somebody like I had who goes, you're stuck. And it's okay to allow yourself to feel stuckness and suffering, but at some point you're going to have to move out of that stuckness, which is the next stage where we're kind of like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to, who can help me? Who can save me? And we still think that someone else is going to save us in this second stage because now we're proactive instead of I'm just in the suffering. But then when we go to stage 3, we realize people can help and support us. But if we're, want to be stuck and we want to continue playing the victim game, we're just going to go round and round in circles. So we actually need to start taking responsibility. And I describe this in detail and what to do and what each stage actually is gifting you, because it is a gift, and then as we move into stage 4, this is where we start to understand about parts of the body and what are they saying, and learn that there is a language of the body. How is it speaking to me? What's really going on inside me? And from there, we start to go to potential working with archetypes, because whilst I think at the beginning of your journey, you might go directly to emotions, what I found over many, many years of doing this is that the anger or the emotion or the frustration in my throat is very different to the anger in my liver, to very different to the anger in my spleen. So if I have anger in my spleen, it's going to be around my feminine side. If I have anger in my liver, it's going to be all to do with the masculine and potentially how I was brought up and, that things are not working in my life. So if it's in my throat, it's the fact that I don't know how to communicate in a way that people are hearing me and I'm so frustrated. If it's in my heart, it's potentially around relationships and challenges in relationships. So each part is so different. And eventually we want to get to understand archetypes because they give us the thinking, the feeling, the experience, and the emotion. And they give us the structure where we can actually observe the growth and transformation, which is difficult to do directly with emotions. However, having said that, it can be very helpful if you're new to this work to start with let's start with emotions, okay? Okay, to start with generalizations, but then moving out of that into specificity is where you're going to have the most profound experiences.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so, is the book going to be released soon, or is it still in the works? How far in advance are we talking here?
I don't know yet because I feel like I'm speaking to my publisher about it, to be honest. So it could be, we could have a digital copy by the time this interview comes out, or it could be early 2026. I do want to release the digital copy first because that's where I really feel like I just want people to know this because it takes a long time to get it to this place. And so that's my conversation actually with my publisher at the moment is, can we allow that to happen and see where it goes? So hopefully sooner rather than later, because that book is going to be a real companion to the secret language of your body in a sense of understanding and coming back and going, which stage am I in? What do I need to do in this stage? How can this help me? You know, when do I release? Have I done the steps towards it? Is this going to be a healthy release, or which is kind of stage 7, or an unhealthy one? You know, what does it look like? What does it mean? What do I still need to do? So yeah, it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I can completely understand why you would want to try to get at least a digital version out, because you can tell how important this is for you to help as many people as possible. And getting that released that quickly can make a difference, because you're right. The print copies take a lot longer for publishing. And so being able to get something out digitally would be amazing. So, you know, hopefully it works out to the best, for everybody. But thank you again for sharing that. And also some of those initial stages, since we didn't quite get to all 8, but it's tremendous. This information that you've shared is just amazing. Oh my gosh. There's so much that we haven't really even shared in this conversation, and we're getting so close to wrapping up. But can we talk about anything that you haven't shared to this point that you really feel like the listener, the person listening, needs to know? What would you like to share?
I think I've touched on it, but the most important things are details. And the way we get to details is by being open to learning about healing and realizing that healing happens in layers. And, we can find understandings of time periods. Time periods are vital to understand. So again, I've mentioned it, that in my work, I've connected them to the chakras and also obviously different parts and organs of the body. And they give you a huge, huge insight into when something was likely to have happened that is impacting you very deeply right now. But for those people who are like me and you're like, I want to be precise and I want to get deeper, and I really want to know how to create maps for my own body, this is where I teach this Awaken Heal Within course. And there I teach you how to awaken your etheric hands. And so you have this, I think I mentioned the etheric body as being the body of ancestry and memory and aliveness. And when we connect to this body, most people talk about subconscious and unconscious. And if I said to them, where is it? Show me, pinpoint it, they would have no clue. And I'm the person that needs to know. I need to know these things. And so what I teach people is exactly where this unconscious and subconscious is, and how to use these etheric hands and how to use timelines to not guess, to not use your mind to mentally get there, but to allow your body to take you there by sensitizing yourself, by allowing your body to become an intuitive body as opposed to a shut down body, right? By being your own healer, because to awaken this healer within is to start to understand all these different pieces. And I also say to people, if you do that, you will never be depressed. You will never be bored, because even depression becomes interesting. Even anxiety becomes interesting. And you don't have time to be bored. You don't have time to waste, because you're in the process of getting to know yourself. And to me, for healing to happen, in a more precise way, in a faster way, in a deeper way, means to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. But to do that, you've got to know the pieces of the puzzle, right? And you have to know yourself. And that huge saying that we've heard so many people say, human being, know yourself, is vital in the healing journey. The more we know ourselves, the more we can transform and become the best versions of ourselves. And I do want to just end it on the fact that people often say, I need to unlearn things. And I disagree with this completely. It's not about unlearning. It is about using the painful experiences to become wiser. So you can't unlearn something, but you can transform something into wisdom that helps you to become the new version of yourself. It's not about wanting to be the version that didn't have the trauma or that didn't have the experiences. It's actually valuing, because I feel like that devalues your experiences by saying, I wish I was, before. It's like, no, value your experience, use it so that you can become the greatest version of yourself through the experiences you've had, because the experiences that you've had are vital for your own growth.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Absolutely. I think even the negative experiences, quote unquote negative experiences are part of who you are and transform you to who you're going to become. So I really agree with you on that. I think that, we shouldn't try to push those things away or wish they hadn't happened, because it is a piece of who we are and who we are becoming. And so I think it's 100% accurate. I completely agree with you on that. And I love what you shared in there also about how often we'll discover like one piece and we go, oh, like I fixed it. That part's gone. I'm going to be perfect now. Not realizing that there's probably 2 or 3 other things that we haven't yet discovered, that once we do in this continuous process of learning about ourselves and understanding our bodies and what's happening within us, we become even healthier because we're uncovering those things too. So good stuff.
Absolutely. Because we can actually think, oh, this doesn't work. I've done the work. It doesn't work. And it's like, no, you haven't connected to the middle bit and to where it is now. So yes, it doesn't work because you haven't put every piece together. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Anna, this has been such an interesting and just phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much. But before we go, would you share if there's books or podcasts that you think that the listeners should check out that have been helpful and beneficial? And of course, absolutely your book, The Secret Language of Your Body. I will include the details in the show notes. But is there any others you'd like to share?
I do have to say, I do listen to the Diary of the CEO, and I love that podcast. I hope that one day I'm on it. It is a beautiful, beautiful podcast with lots of amazing people. So I do love that. And in terms of books, it's a challenging one because I'm the person I have been very, very, very inspired by the work of Rudolf Steiner. So I have hundreds of his books, and I'm the person who mainly reads those types of books because it helps me to connect and put all the pieces together. But what I've done is I've written this book called Understanding Modern Spirituality, which is kind of my take, I should say, on spirituality and asking a lot of deep questions around who we are and really stretching people. And potentially for those who do want to dive in, like I have, into this incredible work of Rudolf Steiner, actually to open the door for them, because it's a very difficult type of work to just jump into without any preparation. So that was my intention, is to stretch people, open their minds, help them to see life in a different way, but also introduce the deeper work of, how I've been impacted by what Rudolf Steiner brought here.
Excellent suggestions. Thank you so much for that. I'll include the details in the show notes. So the book that you just suggested, your book to help people really open their minds and stretch their understanding. Thank you for that. And so lastly, would you share with us how the listeners can find you? Again, follow along with the work you're doing, ask you questions, share with us now.
There are several ways. One is definitely go to my website and put your email in, because we send out so many amazing kind of emails and freebies. And we also talk about, when we have masterclasses or a variety of courses coming up, as well as, I have a lot of card decks that I've created for ancestry, for inner child that's going to come out, for heart healing, for healing yourself, and so on and so forth. So we do kind of, card of the week and things like that to inspire you, just to keep you supported with the tools. And also, please watch the masterclasses. There are several on the page. Start with The Secret Language of Your Body, or Awaken the Healer Within if you have been on this journey for some time. But also connect with me on Facebook. I actually have, if you look me up, Inna Segal author, I also have a group where people share and ask questions. So it's a free kind of inner healing group. So again, easy to find if you look me up on Facebook. I also share a lot on Facebook and Instagram and answer questions when they come up. So those are really great ways to connect with me.
Yes, absolutely. And I will make sure that that information is in the show notes so the listeners can easily find you and connect with you. Thank you for sharing the Facebook group that you have. I think that that's a beautiful thing, offering people an opportunity to connect with you and with others and asking questions. I love that you've got the card decks and you're sharing cards with people to continue to support them in the work that they're doing. So that's awesome. And thank you again so much for coming on the show today and sharing all of this with us. I so appreciate your time and all of this tremendous information. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.